It's October! Oh, I love October. October means Halloween, which I think is like every crafter maker's favorite time of year. So I thought for my first project of October, I would pretty much give you the most last minute costume I can think of, the cheapest. I was going for spending zero extra money, working with what a lot of people already have in their craft stashes. And what I came up with was a Star Trek crew member who got lost in time. So all you really need is a combadge. So for this week, for our upcycled Star Trek combadge, here's what we need.
A flat angle brush and a small paintbrush. Black and silver acrylic paint, tacky glue, at least one pin, something to cut with, I use a box cutter, templates which will be available on the blog or on Instructables, a chunk of paper towel, some thin cardboard, I use a mac and cheese box. Take your two templates, one of the whole combadge and one of just the part that's raised, and trace them onto your cardboard. Make sure you get those details. You might have to adjust a little just because the templates are made of paper. For the one that's raised, err on the side of bigger. It's totally fine if that turns out bigger than the lower piece just because it'll be completely covered up. It's gonna be a little harder to fix if it's smaller than the lower piece though. Then just go ahead and cut them out using an X-Acto blade. I use a box cutter. If you're really good with a pair of scissors, you might be able to do it. My one tip is to cut out the inner details first, then cut out the outer bits. It's gonna make it a lot more stable and give you a lot better shot at getting those details right. Then take your tacky glue and glue your raised part to your whole lower combadge. I use a dabbing motion just to get a thin layer, then push it on and using your fingers, or you can use a paper towel or a Q-tip, clean up everything that's oozed out. Then go ahead and take a large glob of tacky glue. I put it on my finger and then I use a sewing pin to slowly put a raised layer all over the raised bit of the combadge. This is going to make it a more domed, metal-like effect. It's also going to make it really smooth, making it look like it's very polished for the metal paint to cling to. So take your time. I use a pin just to make sure it's going to get fully covered because this stuff doesn't actually like ooze around that much, so you're gonna have to use a pin just to kind of guide it and encourage it to get to every single one of those edges. Don't worry about getting it too even. It will actually like even and level out when it dries. Once you let it dry overnight, the glue will be completely clear. It's then time to bust out your silver paint and your small paintbrush, and you're actually going to get a very small amount and brush a very light layer on the entire inner section. Now the goal here is we're trying to replicate the kind of brushed metal pattern that the combadges have in this section, so just keep moving it back and forth to really create a nice dry brushed look, then let it dry. Once dry, go ahead and do a second coat. Each coat is going to dry pretty quickly, so just give it about 10 minutes in between, and then just pick up some new paint and repeat the same process. Now for your third coat, you're actually going to get a lot more paint. This is going to be a kind of thick coat, but do the same thing where you're basically just going to brush it back and forth until you get a brush pattern that you like, that you can you can see the brushes, you can see how it looks like brushed metal, then just clean up any excess paint. This was the brushstroke pattern I decided I was happy with. I stopped after 3 coats. Now picking up a very small amount of black acrylic paint on your angled brush, you're going to just go ahead and brush very lightly inside the inner part of the combadge, being careful to get as much of the concentrated black gunk into the corners and the edge where like dirt would naturally gather if this was an active in-use combadge. Then, using a piece of paper towel, just get a very small amount of paint and gently dab it onto the inner part of the combadge, being careful to leave those edges and those corners really dirty and gross because again, they're gonna be pretty dirty and gross. Then go ahead and get your small paintbrush, get a healthy glob of paint, and go ahead and paint a nice thick layer on the raised part to give it a polished look. If you want to fix up anything, you can always just put a very tiny amount of silver, just clean up any of the edges inside. Once the paint is dry, go ahead and flip the combadge over and take your pin backs and either using tacky glue or any kind of super glue you happen to have on hand, go ahead and glue it down in an area that doesn't mess up the design you've cut inside the combadge. So for me, that's going to be on the side. Once the glue is dry, go ahead and pin it on any outfit, and congratulations, you are a Star Trek crew member lost in the 2000s.